3. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of
Dudes of Kung Fu.
Outstanding. For a second, I was worried, Alex. I'm like, he had this look on his face like he doesn't know what to fucking say. We only did this 700 times. I'm like, oh shit, Alex is taking a fucking stroke right here on the app. Don't worry, I won't press stop.
Even if I were having a stroke, I would still say it, and then I would just slump to the floor. The glorious final episode of Dudes of Kung Fu.
Well, I'll be co-host next week now.
Yeah, you'll need to find somebody else. Good luck.
What's new and exciting, dude?
I just finished another round of edits for my second book in my series, the Chumq book. Still a few weeks out on getting a final rough draft for a preprint on that. And on top of that, I wrote an article for my first column for Wing Chun Illustrated, because as I mentioned before, I'm going to be a columnist for at least the next 6 issues of Wing Chun Illustrated. So I have my own column. It's called The Kung Fu Genius. And basically, I'm going to rant about mostly Wing Chun culture stuff. I'm not going to talk about techniques or anything like that, or I'm not going to talk about stuff that we've covered on the podcast already. I'm just going to talk about general, like, kind of what's problematic in the culture of Chinese martial arts in the modern day, especially Wing Chun. And my first article I wrote about, I basically debunked this nonsense about this so-called Dai Sifu title, and also people who call themselves Si Heng and expect other people to refer to them as Si Heng, like people who thinks that means like some kind of junior instructor level, not people who actually understand what the term really means. So because as you may well be aware, I get friend requests on Facebook all the time. I don't answer 95% of them, but sometimes I get friend requests from somebody with Si Heng in their Facebook name.
Yeah, right.
And I'm always like, and I know what they think it means. They think it means a junior instructor who is not yet a Sifu. So I always call that the not yet Sifu title.
Right.
But Si Heng is not a title. It doesn't even mean junior instructor. I mean, it's literally anybody who started in your Kung Fu school before you. And started a day before you, and they're your Si Heng. And they might have started a year before you, and then they quit, and you never even saw them. And for the rest of your Kung Fu life, you will have to call them Si Heng. So, but people have mistakenly thought that is some kind of like type for junior instructor that's not quite a Sifu, and then they'll actually use this on their social media names, and so I completely destroy that. And there's another stupid title of Dai Sifu, and for anybody
I've never
who
heard
follows
that before.
And for anybody who follows me on social media, you may have seen a beautifully photoshopped photo of me with a crown on my head as a king with a shirt that says Dai Sifu, and Dai Sifu essentially means great or big Sifu, but it's not something that you would ever call yourself, and it's not something that you would ever expect other people to call you by. It's actually not even a title, and unfortunately became a thing in Europe, and there are people who literally call themselves Dai Sifu, and they'll put it on their business cards and on their websites, and it is, if you understand anything about Chinese culture, it is the most ridiculous thing. So I don't want to give too much away, because I want people to read that column in Wing Chun Illustrated when it comes out, and I hope people will enjoy it. And I put out a feeler there if anybody has any ideas of what they want me to write, although quite frankly I already pretty much know what I'm going to write for the next episode, or for the next issues. By the way, in the latest Wing Chun Illustrated and the next Wing Chun Illustrated, I wrote a 2-part article on tonight's topic, which is Lok Tim Bun Quan, or the long pole in Wing Chun. So people can take a look at that. So I hope I don't repeat myself too much if people have read my article.
Well, we all know that I'm a big fan of Wing Chun Illustrated, and I'm somewhat of a fan of Alex. So together,
don't overstate. Don't overstate.
I mean,
Come on.
Let's not get fucking nuts. Until you have an article about the truth, my impact on your life, then you'll earn my respect. But it's Alex Richter and a steady column in Wing Chun Illustrated is a good thing for everybody. I'm excited. I'm excited about seeing the second half of the Luk Tim Bun Quan article, just so I know what to say on this fucking podcast.
Well, did you read the first part?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Right.
Okay, I have no idea. Sometimes my own students don't even know that, because I write so many of those articles, they don't even know. Like, one of my students actually on Facebook yesterday said, could you write something about the history of the long pole? And I'm like, I just wrote that in Wing Chun Illustrated, like, and it's one of my like really close students. You know, oh man. Yeah, so Loktin Bunguan, I mean, I'm actually very excited about this topic, because I think that of all the topics in Wing Chun, and we covered the first 4 forms in the last 4 episodes, but I think that long pole in general is something that's not talked about as much in Wing Chun, because unlike some of the other Kung Fu styles, the weapons tend to be less emphasized in Wing Chun. 1, because I think, honestly, not a lot of people learn them, and not a lot of people learned a proper version of them. And 2, even from lineages that do have let's say, a respectable version of Loktin Bunguan, a lot of people, quite frankly, are a bit lazy to train it, or they don't really see its utility or use anymore, so they don't do it. And I find that Loktin Bunguan in Wing Chun is kind of a dying art. And so I almost sound repetitive, but I've written quite a bit about the long pole in Wing Chun Illustrated, because, well, I think a lot of the other topics have already been written about, and I think long pole is not being preserved enough by Wing Chun people. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, well, I think, and one of the other reasons is so many people leave the system before learning the weapons. You know, with the weapons being
Right.
at the very end, so many people leave the system after, like, the Zhang and Vyuji, that the only thing they know about the pole is what they, you know, glanced over their shoulder, learned from, you know, some of their Sihings in the class,
Sure.
not their, you know, not the Dai Sifu, only the Sihings. But
no one can see the Dai Sifu. He's locked in a room in a castle somewhere.
Right. But, you know, so many people really don't know the form. That's actually my level in Wing Chun. I spend most of my time on Loktin Bunguan. In fact, this last weekend, I had a bunch of my students and friends here and my Sifu, and we spent the whole weekend playing with our poles, and it was just incredible. We had a whole weekend, a good portion of it spent on Loktin Bunguan, and we had a lot of fun. They came in for my birthday, and it was really nice, and I got some really awesome gifts, and we had a great Kung Fu weekend. You know, it was like
that's awesome. I saw a video of the video that you posted too with your Sifu. Just gave a brief explanation of Tanguan.
Right, Tanguan, right? Because we were talking about, well, so the reason that was even shot was because I was doing something wrong. I was turning my lead foot too much. I was kind of like taking a step off with Tanguan, and he was trying to get. So of course I passed this bad habit on to my students, and it was like, you know, so he was trying to get that. The idea is just to clear center, that you just got that you can step off if need be, but it's
right in
really,
application. Yeah.
In application, but for the form, just to kind of the idea at that point of the form is just to clear center. That
right.
To move center, and that's, you know, I've thought of this before, but with knowing us doing the podcast and spending the last weekend with spending so much time with the long pole, one of the things that popped into my head when he said this, that, oh, Sean, just think about, you know, moving center a little bit, just to clear center. That I don't know if you see it this way, Alex, and that's fine. You're allowed to disagree this one time. I kind of looked at Bunguan as a microcosm of the whole Wing Chun system.
How dare you?
Motherfucker! Right. Stab that motherfucker. It's if I look at it, like, at least the way I learned it, and the way I perform Loktin Bunguan, is the way we do it in my lineage is basically you do 3 POON, three thrusting pole. I don't know how to say it other than just that's what it is, thrusting pole. And that's kind of like I've said on the podcast before, like, I look at the 3 forms as, you know, learn to center, first form is learn the center, second form, move the center, third form, recover the center. If you look at Lukten Quan, it starts off with learning the center, and then you move the center. How we move it, we do Dan Quan, Kun Quan, Fu Quan, and then you recover the center, the half point, which and we say the half point is the recovery end of it. That is to recover the center. And that's kind of like how we break down the form in that way. And to me, I look at that and I say, wow, it's the same thing as the empty hand forms. Now, that may be just the way Moyat broke it down. It may be just the way my Sifu understood it from Moyat. But this is my understanding of it. Right. Is when you look at the three forms, if you look at the three forms as, learn the center, move the center, recover the center, and then you look at the Lukten Quan form, you're learn the center, you're drilling the center with your Puquans, then you're moving the center, Dan Quan, Fu Quan, and then you recover the center, Lan Quan and the half point movement. It's just, I just looked at it, I was like, wow, it's like a really nice microcosm of the system, Right. And, I just, for me, it was like one of those light bulbs that go off. I don't even know if it's important or means anything, but when I think of shit, I write it down. Just one day when I ever do write a book.
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting. You said a few things in there that are definitely quite similar to how we do things. I think the first thing we have to kind of get off our chest, and this is very important before we even start, is basically, and I say this when I teach the first lesson of long pole, it's get over it. When you start talking about the long pole, everything is basically one dick joke. All right? So
right, exactly right.
And it's like, so you have to get like the giggles out of you because you're going to say stuff like cross poles and like, you have to make the tip of the end vibrate. And it's like, all right, just get it out of your system, because it's going to be, this podcast is
I never even thought of that before. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, this podcast is essentially going to be a long "that's what she said" / dick joke. All right. So, having said that, well, it's interesting too. Back to the point your Sivo had made a small point about the Tanguan, about not moving the front foot. And it's interesting. That's exactly how we do it in the Langting lineage. And very funny, when that video came out, a very famous troll who we don't need to mention by name, a notorious YouTube troll, whom we actually know who he is, and he's basically kind of attacked all the Wing Chun people, but he gave away his identity by accident on multiple occasions. He goes, "Oh, there's no so-called Tanguan," and I can say, well, actually, that troll is totally wrong, because I've seen the 1967 footage of Grandmaster Yip Man's long pole form. So as I mentioned multiple times on this podcast, in 1967, Tang Sang, a very close private student of Yip Man, filmed him doing the forms in the Detectives Club, and Grandmaster Yip Man doing the Siunam Tao, the Chum Kyu, the complete Wun Dummy techniques, and the long pole. And this video was kept in Tang Sang's private collection until he passed away in 1986 or 1987. After he passed away, the video went on to my Sifu, Keith Kanspecht, in Germany, to which he gave Sifu Leungting a copy of it. But the original one my Sifu has, and Leungting has a copy of it. And for those of us who learned the long pole under the Leungting banner, we're shown the video. It's kind of like, like they always say, when you become president, take you in the back room and they show you all the secrets, and then suddenly you realize there is no escape, right? So I actually had the chance to see the 1967 footage of Grandmaster Yip Man performing the Siunam Tao, Chum Kyu, Wooden Dummy, and long pole. So and not to brag or anything, but only people that my Sifu or Leungting has shown this video to have ever seen it, because Tang Sang had never seen it. In fact, even Tang Sang's only student, Lo Pingfei, who he taught in the 70s, didn't even, when I asked him, he didn't even know the video existed. So actually, Tang Sang was extremely loyal to Yip Man. In fact, that he never showed anybody this video, even his students, his entire life. And he entrusted it to Sifu Kanspecht after he passed away, because quite frankly, he didn't want it to go to the Chinese, because he was afraid that they were going to exploit it and try to sell it for profit and Yip Man didn't want that video to be out there. So having seen it, I'm one of a few people who've actually seen Yip Man perform the Loktim Bun Quan. As a result, I'm very keenly aware of what his long pole form looked like, and keenly aware of people who claim to be teaching his long pole form and swear that they learned it from him and what he teaches is the most authentic. And I can tell you without a shred of doubt in my heart that they either made it up or it is in fact just a complete fabrication in some other way, or they borrowed Loktim Bun Quan from another source or something like that, right? So in fact, Grandmaster Yip Man does the Tan Quan the same way your Sifu was showing you in that video, and the same way Sifu Lang Ting showed me, in the same way a number of other highly reputable Wing Chun Sifus show it. So that troll, that internet troll with his opinions, he's I don't know where he's coming off of, but he's in fact dead wrong on that. and so I just thought that was kind of funny. Well, I mean, it's just funny because he on certain occasions really seems to be an insider, and on many things he actually falls flat on his face, which is really funny. It'd be great to actually out that guy someday, but he's actually not really. He's such a small potato, it doesn't even matter. Like you had mentioned, the long pole form is essentially a microcosm of Wing Chun, and that is because the Loktim Bun Quan that we teach in Wing Chun has been highly modified by the Wing Chun fistfighting concept. So we have adopted a lot of Wing Chun fistfighting ideas into the Loktim Bun Quan. The original Loktim Bun Quan, which predates the Wing Chun version, doesn't have many of those Wing Chun elements in there. It doesn't have things like Qi Guan and Pun Guan, and it doesn't use names like Tan and Fuk.
Right.
It uses simpler names just like cover and circle and cut. That I think a lot of Wing Chun people, especially those who believe that we are passing on unadulterated museum pieces from our forebears, they have to understand that whether it was Yip Man or Yip Man's teachers or whatever, the Loktim Bun Quan in Wing Chun is highly modified to be adapted to Wing Chun fist fighting ideas, and that alone makes it different from the original one.
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of start off with those points there.
I have a question for you, young man. What do you have a let me preface. This is how it's broken down in our lineage. How Loktim Bun Quan level is broken down in our lineage into four sections. You start off with Jin Choi, so basically a low stance, battle punches to the side, right? And you'll do that for however amount of months that you can do that. And those are basically taught to us as a way of strengthening your lower body to handle being that low. And from there we go to just Buquan. You learn Buquan, thrusting pole, right? You learn we call it Dil Tai Ma. I don't know if you guys call it something different.
Yeah,
Dil Tai Ma.
Ding Ji Dil Tai Ma or Ding Ji Ma. It has a few names, but I know that name.
Okay, so yeah, I learned it as Dil Tai Ma, and that's the pole sits on your rear hip, and for us, with the point doesn't go higher than our heads. Arms are extended, all the weight's on your rear leg. It's like a 3-point stance. And we learned that so Buquan to us is, and so we'll go from Dil Tai Ma, you drop into Jin Ma, which is our wide stance for the punches, do the pole thrust, return to Dil Tai Ma, then we do, again, the terminology. We all know I suck at terminology. I know it as Dun Quan, which is like chop down, right?
Yeah, Dun Quan, yeah.
Dil Quan, chop up is what that's what I wrote in my notes, chop up. I don't know. It was basically clearing of the line, going down and up, bang, bang kind of thing.
Right.
And so that's like the second part of the system. The third part of Loktim Bun Quan level, not the form level, is Chi Quan, which is a sticking pole drill. God, does that sound fucked up.
I told you. That's why I said everyone just has to get it out of their system. It's all dick jokes.
Actual Loktim Bun Quan is not the name of the pole. That's something that drives me a little nuts online. You hear people refer to Loktim Bun Quan as if that's the name of the pole. That's the name of the form.
Right.
And it's not until you go through the first three, sub-levels of that section that you'll actually learn the form from us in my lineage.
So that's progression.
That's our progression in how we do it. At least, and that's how I learned it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say one little cool thing that I just kind of dig on is Moyat would tell the story that he actually learned the Lukten Bun Quan form. I know I've told you the story before, but Moyat actually learned the Lukten Bun Quan form from Yip Man on a chopstick over dim sum.
Right.
And that idea of Kung Fu life, of discussing the system over meals and everything, he passed on, and that's how my Sifu learned it was introduced to the form over dim sum from Moyat with a chopstick. I actually learned it at my kitchen table with a pencil. And then we went in my living room and broke things with the actual pole. But it's just kind of cool. It's like a little side thing that, like, Moyat learned it in this really cool way with a chopstick from Yip Man, and then passed it on that way, And I just think that's kind of cool. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I've heard similar stories before. I mean, I think people forget that Graham Stephen is quite old, especially in the latter part of his teaching career. So, it wasn't long pole for anybody who's trained it. It's one of those things that it requires a certain amount of strength to be able to wield it correctly. Of course, we're trying to find the most efficient way to hold the weapon, so we're not purely using brute strength to hold it up there and move. You want to move it in a way where it's actually your body that is generating the power, and you're not just flapping your arms around. But even so, you still need a baseline of power to even wield the thing. And if you don't train long pole for like a few weeks, and then you pick up a long pole, it lets you know. Long pole is a very fickle mistress. If you neglect it, she will definitely hit you back. Now, to answer the question on the progression, we also have a 4-part progression to how we teach the long pole. It's a little bit different, structured a little bit differently than the way you did, but it's still somewhat similar structure. So part 1 is essentially strength training and foundational skills. So we would do things like jin choi, in the horse stance with the punches, the preparatory punches. Right. You do things like POON, and then you do a whole battery of strength training exercises, lang guan and dang, up in the air, moving side to side. So all these kind of things to essentially strengthen your arms and shoulders and forearms to hold the weapon, and the basic POON, the basic stance, and these arrow punches. That's one, and that's strength training and foundation. Part 2 is the Lukten Bun Quan form. So then we teach the Lukten Bun Quan form in its entirety. And then once you've learned that, the third part is to learn the KWAN. And then we have a whole KWAN progression, starting from POON Guan to different exercises and attack and counter and up and down and this and that. And then the fourth part is Lat Guan. Lat Guan is the application of the long pole without contact. So if KWAN is teaching you how to defend and attack when you have contact with the other weapon, then Lat Guan is, okay, now we're squared off, we're essentially sparring, and then you're going to attack me, and then we're going to defend these things essentially against live attacks. And that's the 4-part progression that's taught in WT. It's interesting that there's a bone of contention, well, I shouldn't say a bone of contention, but there's a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of the term jin choi for the basic punches. So when we start teaching long pole, we essentially teach our students to go into the horse stance and then to do these kind of side-on punches. And that's for training the waist and training the stance and training the accuracy of lining up your shoulder and all this kind of stuff. And it's essentially a preparatory exercise. But the problem is, the word jin in Cantonese could be arrow, but it could also be battle. And so there's discrepancy between whether the term means arrow punches, because you're shooting them to the side almost as if you're drawing a bow and arrow, or if it means battle punches. And in the Leungting system, we use the term arrow punches. And I know in the Moyat system, they use the term battle punches. And that's because those two terms actually are homophones. They sound identical in Chinese. The only difference is the character and obviously the meaning, but they sound the same. So that's interesting. But yeah, we have this 4-part progression from strength training to form to Qigwan to Latguan. And that's how it's done in the Leungting system. Now, so our progressions are similar. They're both 4 parts, even though the order may be a little bit different. It's something that nobody can agree on, what the term Lok Tim Pun Guan means. Now, we know it means 6.5-point pole, which is the name of the techniques, and not, like you said, not the name of the actual pole itself. The pole is, it means pole. And the type of pole that is used in Wing Chun is called Xu Mei Guan or Dan Tao Guan. Dan Tao Guan means single-headed pole. What we mean by single-headed pole, it means that we only hit with one end. If you look at like the other Shaolin styles, they have like the poles are a little bit shorter and they hit with both sides of it. And that's known as Seung Tao Guan. Seung Tao Guan means double-headed pole, means you hit with both ends. But Wing Chun, we essentially use our pole like a spear. We only use the one side. So that's why it's known as a Dan Tao Guan or a single-headed pole. And the other name for it is Xu Mei Guan. Xu Mei Guan means the rat-tailed pole because, as many people know, it's tapered at the end. It's like maybe 2 inches thick on the handle end, or maybe a little bit thicker, and then 1 inch thick on the striking end. So it's a tapered long pole. It's a very specific design. And I see that because I see a lot of people doing the Yip Man long pole, and they're using like little stabs, or they're using like bamboo sticks, or they're not even using like the correct equipment. But one of the things that even in the Yip Man lineage, no one can agree upon is what are the 6.5 points. So I don't know if you want, I mean, if you don't want to give it away in your system, that's fine. But if you maybe wanted to elaborate a little bit on what the 6.5 point name means to you.
Okay, so what it means to me, I have no problem. I'll fucking say anything, you know. I think it's very basic, I'll be honest with you. As far as the way I've learned it, and when you break down the form as it's taught in Moyat Wing Chun, the 6 points are literally the 6 Buquans in the form. You start off with 3 thrusts right down center, then you go Tan Guan, thrust 4, Xun Quan, thrust 5, Fu Quan, thrust 6, and then the half point. That's some debates. So there's this kind of like recovery movement with the poles. You'll do what I call lan quan. So you thrust like basically the pole takes on the shape of a lancao, right? You thrust it out, and then from there it comes to center, and that coming to the center is a recovery motion. And then you come back, and then you do this like little flip in the Moyat Wing Chun. They just kind of like flip it, just bring it down to your waist. Some people, some of my Kung Fu uncles will refer to just that little section as the half point because it kind of it kind of like takes the shape of a half of a point. Right. My Sifu teaches me that the whole recovery part of the form is the half point of the form. So you have the 6 full thrusts, 3 down center, and then 3 after one after each movement, and then the recovery end of the form is what we refer to as the half point. And so that's how we come up with 6.5 points. Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've researched Lok Tim Pun Guan quite a bit because I'm really fascinated by it. First of all, I think it's a lot of fun to practice, and I also think that a lot of people in Wing Chun don't really pay a lot of attention to it. So I decided to really, put a little extra effort in making sure that the long pole techniques that I learned from Sifu Leungting and also from other famous Chinese masters is really as top-notch as I can make it, and that the students have a chance to really practice with weapon, not just like learn the form and then say they know it, but like really know that they can use it. So after learning the Lokdin Bungwan in the Leungting system, and I, like I said, I didn't just learn it from Sifu Leungting, I also learned it from you know, other high level masters in his association. Most notably, I did some training in the Lokdin Bungwan with Sifu Carson Lau and also Sifu Elman Leung, among others. And after I left Sifu Leungting's association, I went to Hong Kong. Actually, I just did this 2 years ago, and I wanted to learn the Lokdin Bungwan from the Lam Sai Wing lineage. Lam Sai Wing is one of the most famous Hong Gar masters in like the lore of Hong Gar. He was like Wong Fei Hong's most famous student. And Lam Sai Wing Bungwan in one of his forms. And I saw it on the video, and I talked about this in that first part of the article. I saw it in the video, and the Lokdin Bungwan from the Lam Sai Wing lineage looked very, very similar to Yip Man's long pole form in the Tang San video. And I saw that, and I was like, what? Like,
Right.
because here was a Hong Kun form, a Hong Kun version of Lokdin Bungwan that looked closer to Yip Man's form than many of Yip Man's own students who claim that they're doing the actual long pole form. So that's when I knew. I was like, you know, I don't want to put anybody in a bad light, but I really feel that a lot of the students of Grandmaster Yip Man are unfortunately bullshitting the fact that they learned the Lokdin Bungwan, because having seen Yip Man's Lokdin Bungwan on the video, and having been able to compare it to what Sifu Leungting teaches and what was taught in Hong Kong or whatever, I feel I have a pretty strong baseline in terms of what Lokdin Bungwan is supposed to look like. And there are always variations, but I know kind of what the main movements are. And many of Yip Man's so-called close students or whatever they're just, you know, and some guys doing a drum solo, to go back to, like, you know, music was another one of your passions. You know, when somebody's doing a drum solo and there's like a moment when they kind of sputter out, and you can tell that they've kind of used all of their best drum movements, and they're like, and then just like, right? And then maybe in a moment later, then they come back to doing some standard song they know. It's like that kind of like total lack of creativity sputtering that happens in a drum solo. I feel that that's what most people are doing when they put a long pole in their hand. Even people who go on YouTube and they're like, here, and then they're just kind of doing some stuff they saw once, but they don't really know what they're doing. Sure. You can tell there's a few telltale signs as to whether somebody is a real long pole expert, and you know, I can take a look at somebody's video and know right away, even if the Lokdin Bungwan is different from the one I do, and they're always different. Right. But you can still tell if there's certain principles that are adhered to. You go, okay, that dude knows what he's doing with that weapon, or that guy is he's just drum solo sputtering with something in his hands. You know what I mean?
Sure,
and so that's the meaning of Lokdin Bungwan. I've come to notice that there are as many definitions of what the actual points are and what it means, how many people you ask. So if you ask certain people in the Yuan lineage, you'll get very direct answers. Like, for example, in the Leungting system, you know, we basically say, okay, in the Lokdin Bungwan, we have 6 so-called full movements and then 1 half movement, right? And then, but those are 6 specific movements, and only one of them is biu. So like in the Leungting system, it's like biu, tang, cao, tiu, Hun, But, and then the half fence is the Bun Jelan. So those are like essentially 7 movements, and the 7th one is that so-called half point, right?
Right.
And those are not, it doesn't mean that there are only 7 movements in the form. It means that those are like 7. And so, for example, biu, there are many different ways to do biu from different positions, and they all fall under the point of biu. And then dangguan, there are many different ways of doing dangguan. You can hit it on the floor, you can hit it on someone's weapon, you can thrash it. So there's many different ways of doing dang, and they all fall under the category of that one point. Q, the sideward flick. There are different ways of doing the sideward flick. Now, that's Leungting's way of doing it. So you have 7 specific points. But then you have people, like you said, like, okay, you basically have 6 stabs with the pole, and then we have some kind of half technique, whatever that is, whether that's a section or a specific movement or whatever. I've heard that explanation from other people as well, not just from you. Then, you know, I've heard other people have another seven specific movements that are slightly different than the ones Leung Ting listed. So I'm starting to have the feeling that there's not a whole lot of agreement. Even when I learned it from the Hong Kong guy, the master Mak Chi Kong, I asked him, I said, so Mak Sifu, what are the 6.5 points? One of the top Hong Kong masters in Hong Kong, and he's one of the most skilled. When you see him with the pole in his hand, then he starts doing the Lok Tin Bun Guan or even the other Hong Kong forms, you go, yeah, that's a master with the weapon. I mean, he's not just somebody who's just doing a fancy form. Like, he actually knows how to use it in combat, and he can explain it. And so Wing Chun people have to realize that even in traditional Kung Fu, they're not the only ones who can apply something. There are other Kung Fu styles that they're really practical, and those guys also know what they're doing. And I asked Mak Sifu, and Mak Sifu taught me the form, and it was just amazing. I mean, I did like 7 hours of training with him just to learn his version of Lok Tin Bun Guan and his applications. It was amazing. And I asked him, I said, so what are the 6.5 points in the Lam Sai Wing lineage? And he looked at me and he's like, I'm not sure. Tells me they're not sure. I trust them automatically, because people will talk out of their asses when they don't know what they made. And people who really don't know are not afraid of saying they don't know, you know? And I wish more martial artists would say, you know what, I'm not sure about that, but this is my idea, or I'm not sure about that, maybe you should go ask that guy, right? But he also had a very similar explanation to what you have, because in the Lam Sai Wing Lok Tin Bun Guan, which I believe is, well, it's certainly a much older version than our Wing Chun version, probably closest to the original one. It's definitely closer to the original one than any Wing Chun version is, right? So that's why I was super keen to learn it. But they also do a total of 6 stabs. Now, in Wing Chun, a lot of the Wing Chun styles do, like, they start with 3 stabs, all right? And whether they do 3 with continuous steps, or they do 3 and go back, and then 1 and then go, like, they go 1 and go back, 1 and go back, 1 and go back. Or in the Leung Ting system, we actually do 3 consecutively while advancing. But if you total the number of Pu Guans in the Leung Ting form, it also totals 6. And we basically do 3 at the beginning, and then we do 1 this side, 1 on that side, and then we do you know, 1 at the end, which is the 6th one, right? And then you did it like you had 3 and then 1 on that, like, and then so the order might be a little bit different, but it comes to 6. Well, in the Lam Sai Wing version, it also comes to 6, but they do 2 to the middle, 2 to that side, and 2 to the other side, total of 6. And then he also does like a half, like a big circle movement at the end that he calls the half point. So what I'm looking at is, I'm going, very few styles are going to be in total agreement about anything, but I'm starting to feel that the things that are in all the different lineages are closer to the truth than the differences are between your version and my version. You know what I mean? So I'm going like, well, at the end of the day, you have 6 stabs. The Leung Ting version has 6 stabs. The older Lam Sai Wing version has 6 stabs. So maybe it's not the way Leung Ting says it, like Biu Dang Tiu, Tao, all those. Maybe it literally is 6 stabs and then some kind of circling, recovering, whatever you want to call it, at the end as being essentially a half point. So although in the Leung Ting system we have 7 specific points, but I'm open-minded enough to go, well, that's an explanation for it, but it could also be a simpler one like yours, 6 stabs and then some round stuff at the end. You know what I mean? And so I think there's definitely something to be said for that. And yeah, so I think we're more in agreement on those things than, you know, the differences would make it seem to be.
This was a lot of fun. This was a lot of, you know, Lok Tin Bun Guan doesn't get spoken about a lot, and no. I'm really glad we did this tonight.
Yeah, me too. Are we out of time already?
Oh, it's a full hour.
That went by so fast, and I realized I still had a ton more shit to talk about.
Well, I mean, we could talk a little bit more.
Well, no, we could do a long poll part 2. Remember, we need to squeeze this lemon, sir. Because actually, what we did today is we talked about the progression of Lok Tin Bun Guan. We've talked a little bit about a little bit about how it's taught and what it is, but we haven't really talked about it too much from a technical standpoint, and we haven't talked about too much of like the training method. So I think that might make a great future podcast to actually do like the Loktim Bungwan 2.0 podcast, because then I actually, although we could easily do a 2.0 podcast on any of the form topics we did, we could do Siunam Tao again and again and again from different perspectives. But I'm excited to do Loktim Bungwan more because, like you said, it's so rarely talked about that
Right.
I don't think it's gotten its fair shake. Loktim Bungwan as a technique, as a body of knowledge, as something that enhances your Wing Chun skill is something that I think needs to be pushed out a little bit more in the forefront. And people who are like, well, when am I going to fight with a 9-foot-long weapon? When are you going to fight with your fists anyway, for the most part, when these people talk?
Right.
Second of all, actually, I have a very solid answer for why Loktim Bungwan is vital to really understand Wing Chun. And I think that's another podcast. I think if I just kind of talked about it quickly now, I wouldn't do it justice. You know what I mean? So I think we should definitely save that for another time.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, we're right at an hour right now. I think we're 55 minutes kind of thing. We wanted to mention two things before we say goodbye. While we were on the podcast, I just got a message that Pete Jacobs, an original Bruce Lee student that trained in the Bruce Lee's Chinatown School, passed away. And it's a really sad thing. I mean, I know he was very good friends with my teacher, Steve Golden. Steve Golden and Pete Jacobs were very close. And it's a sad thing. I don't mean to end the podcast on a sad note, but I literally just got a notification about it. And I wanted to make sure we pass our condolences on to Mr. Jacobs' family and friends and students. And we are absolutely sorry to hear this. I remember years ago hearing that Pete Jacobs, in his little backyard school or garage school, he named it, I don't remember the name of the city, but let's just say Long Beach or Long Branch Gun Club, no guns allowed. And that was the name of his school. And I just thought that was very cool. It was a gun club, no guns allowed.
Yeah, that's funny. I think, when another martial artist passed away who had some, for us, connection to Wing Chun or Bruce Lee or Jeet Kune Do, and obviously people are, passing away in other arts as well, but, obviously Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do is our main thing. This is why I think people really need to do a better job in terms of preserving the stories and preserving, the stories of their sifus and the techniques and all this. This is part of what I'm doing in that greater Yip Man project, is say, there's only a finite number of people who train with Yip Man who are still around, same as in with Bruce Lee, and they're not getting any younger. And nowadays, if you have an iPhone 7, you have a video camera on your phone that can shoot in 4K. And if you are a student of somebody who trained with Bruce Lee or trained with Yip Man or trained with anybody of note, put a camera in front of them and just ask them to just tell you some stories and what it was like. And it doesn't have to be what so-and-so's bong sao or straight punch look like or whatever, but just the stories of like the funny things that happened in school, things that really humanize these people that we all look up to. Because we couldn't put an iPhone in front of Grandmaster Yip Man back in those days, but we can do it with the people who are still around. And archiving these things is we're in a period now where it's easier than it's ever been in human history. And I would really implore people to not take their sifus for granted, because sifus, whether they came from a famous lineage or not, if you're learning from somebody who is really worth learning from, they're a treasure trove of knowledge, of stories, of things that, they're not going to be around forever. And you're going at one point, when your sifu's not around anymore, you're going to want to go, man, what was that story again that sifu used to always tell us about, whatever. And one day that's going to be too late. So don't let it be too late. Put a camera in front of somebody that you really respect. Of course, you have to ask their permission first, but do your best to archive whatever it is, because The arts need them.
Sure.
The traditional martial arts really need it. Absolutely.
And Alex's students should especially do this because Lord knows there's not enough fucking video of Alex talking. And quite frankly, we all know that one day I'm going to just reach out and choke this son of a bitch. And he's not going to be here to correct me on how I said some fucking Chinese word. So,
how did you say "Look Ting Pun Guan" again?
Look Ting Pun bite me. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. That one was the best one so far. So, as always, as we wrap it up here, just want to remind you guys to give us a like on our Dudes of Kung Fu Facebook page if you have not done so already. Also, whenever we post these podcasts to the Dudes of Kung Fu Facebook page, please reshare it. Let other people know it. Like the living hell out of it. If you have multiple Facebook accounts, like you got your regular one and then you got the weird one that you stalk people with, like it with that one too. We need all the help we can get. If you listen to this podcast on iTunes or Android, please write reviews on iTunes or Android because those things really do help to up our numbers. We did hit a milestone last week. We surpassed 20,000 downloads on the Dudes of Kung Fu podcast, which is amazing. So we thank you guys for all that awesome support. We are also on Twitter, Dudes of Kung Fu. You can send us messages. Now, guys, we're not always on Facebook. We also have lives outside of the social media world. I'm a tremendously busy martial arts instructor. Sean has like a real job and he teaches people and he also plays guitar. So, you know, we can't always answer right away. And sometimes we're not always going to answer because we have other messages we need to attend to. So, you know, be a little patient with us if you guys send us messages. But don't let that dissuade you from sending us messages. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and yeah, let people know about the Dudes of Kung Fu podcast.
And so, in addition to that, we should tell them about the Dudes on MMA.
That's right. So we're going to do a once-a-month podcast on Dudes on MMA so that our very sensitive Jeet Kune Do and Wing Chun listeners who don't know and or like and or offended by MMA don't need to listen to Sean and I talk about Conor McGregor ever again on this podcast. Because, my God, people are like, well, you can do, you know, like, I love the thing you did about Wing, but, like, I don't even know who, like, Anderson Silva is. I don't even want to hear about that. So it's like, okay. Apparently, Sean and I are the only Jeet Kune Do and Wing Chun people who do not get our panties in a bunch about MMA, and we actually quite like it. So we're going to put that on a separate platform so as to not offend anyone's sensibilities who listens to us. So, yeah.
So,
look out for that. That should be coming soon.
Yeah, look out. We're going to call it Dudes on MMA. All right, guys. Hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. When we come back with the next Dudes of Kung Fu, we're going to hit the Bachang Dao, or however you say it.
Wait, say that again? I just love hearing you say Chinese. You know what? If we have fans out there, okay?
It translates to mean short fucking knife.
So, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the most famous long pole motto, which is Yat Chun Cheng, Yat Chun Keng, which is 1 inch longer, 1 inch stronger, which is like my favorite. And that is a honest to God long pole motto. Anyway, if we have a fan out there who does like audio clips and stuff like that, I would love for somebody to go through our last few seasons of Dudes of Kung Fu and just cut out all of the clips of Sean saying the Chinese terminology and just string it together into one video and so one audio clip and send it to me so I can like I can make my own funny video on it.
So you can fucking study it, you prick.
It would be so great. I would love to hear it, or even just the audio clips of me making fun of Sean when he totally fails at the Chinese. That would be great.
Oh yeah.
So
anyway. Oh yeah, Alex Richter student, start taping him because I'm going to choke this motherfucker.
I guarantee it's one of your students sent it to me. Thanks for listening.
All right, guys.
Next week.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.